super fun, and all about artisan cheese and more to melt your peaceful heart and toast your peaceful life. Coming to you from the Appalachian Mountains of southwestern Virginia, this is the Peaceful Heart FarmCast.
Hey, this is Scott Hall from Peaceful Heart Farm, and you are listening to the Peaceful Heart FarmCast.
Hello, everybody. Melanie Hall here. Hope you are doing very, very well. The conversation today and every day revolves around the value of tradition, traditional homestead living, traditional raw milk products, and artisan cheese. Topics discussed here are designed to create new perspectives and possibilities for how you might add the taste of tradition to your life. Today's topic is cheddar cheese. That's right. It's time for another trivia podcast, and this one is all about cheddar cheese. Is your mouth watering yet? I must say that I do make a fantastic cheddar cheese, and I hope you will get to try it one day. I want to take a minute and say welcome to all the new listeners, and welcome back to the veteran homestead-loving regulars who stop by the FarmCast for every episode. I appreciate you all so much. And before we get started on the cheddar facts, let me give you an update on what's going on at the homestead. If you're listening to this podcast sometime in the future, your date marker is that we are in the middle of June, almost at the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. The crops are starting to come in already. We are continuing the overwhelmed portion of the year. It starts in spring and continues right on through the fall. Planting, weeding, harvesting, storing food. And of course, along the way, you've got the animals that need additional care, breeding cycles, milking twice a day, and flies. Always the flies. And this year, they are particularly high in population. I think large dumps of wet rain at the perfect time of year for the propagation of flies is making the animals miserable. And we're working on that. Well, let's talk about the cows. They get the worst of the flies. But I think we've got that under control for them. The artificial insemination process has officially begun. The first step is to get all the cows that are being bred to cycle at nearly the same time. This is especially important for a dairy. Ideally, the calves will be born within days of each other. In the first few days after calving, the cows produce a thick, nutritious milk product called colostrum. It is high in fat, and most importantly, it is filled with the antibodies the calves need to survive and thrive. Now, we can save that milk. Once they get past that point, we can save the milk for cheese making or fulfilling herd share obligations. We can't save the initial milk, colostrum. That must all go to the calves. And there's a lot of it. We save it in jars and cans and gradually dole it out to the calves. So we go for 5 to 7 days of just collecting that milk. And once we get into keeping the milk, then we get to keep every single drop of it until the backlog of the milk and colostrum that we've been storing gets consumed by the calves. And then once they get through all of that, then we share some of the awesome milk with the calves, and we get less milk for cheese making and our herd shares. So the reason that we need the births to be close together is the timing of who's in colostrum and who are we milking. Because again, there's that 5 to 7 day period where you're milking them, but you're having to keep that colostrum milk separate. And we milk two cows at a time. And if the calves are close together, then it's easy to just milk everybody the same. So they're all colostrum or they're all good milk. So if that doesn't happen, then we end up milking out the ones who are in the stage of producing milk that we can use. And then in the end, then we will milk out those who are still producing colostrum and save that in a separate place again for the calves. And again, ideally, everybody produces their colostrum all together. Everybody has their calves within days of each other. Everybody goes through their colostrum cycle. And then we can just get on with just milking everybody and not worrying about stopping and pouring up the milk and then starting again milking for the colostrum milk. So this is our second year of AI, and so far it's going well. So tomorrow the placing of the sperm happens, and then we wait for 3 weeks to see if anyone comes into heat again. Of course, we hope that everyone takes on the first try, But how often does that actually happen? I don't know. Again, we are new to this process, so we can hope for the best. The sheep are still grazing safely right outside my living room window. I think we are past the predator issues for the moment. We are still looking for a dog to add to the homestead. I don't ever want to go through that kind of predator loss again. Lambert is in there with the girls. Perhaps we will have lambs again in the fall. We shall see. But all's going well there with those guys at this time. They've shed all of their winter coats, and they're looking great. Now, I don't think I said anything about the quail in the last podcast. Now, that's a first, right? Well, the first batch has been processed. Well, we kept almost all of the girls. They didn't get processed. They filled out the breeding groups that were missing a hen, and we replaced one complete breeding group that was older. And then there were the remaining 10 we kept for extra eggs, and they're all laying pretty well at this point. So we've got our 3 breeding groups, and then we've got the 10 extra hens that they'll get processed when the next batch comes around. But the second group, that was the really small hatch, remember that? And there were only 19. So they're now in the penthouse just growing away. They're growing like weeds. We did lose one, so there are 18 up there on the left side of the grow-out cage. And again, the right side of the grow-out cages has the extra hens that we kept to lay eggs for us. And now we come to the third batch that are in the incubator, and there are 72 eggs in there, and they go into lockdown in 2 days. And then 2 days after that, we will begin to hear some beeping. Let's pray that we have a better hatch rate this time. We shall see. Now, the biggest news that I have at the moment is the garden. That's taken up the most of my time. We planted lots and lots and lots of peas. I wanted them for the farmers markets. Well, I got my wish. There are so many peas out there. And now today, instead of trying to pick from each plant, which I did a few days ago, I picked a 5-gallon bucket a few days ago, and I didn't even get halfway down the row. So today I just decided to pull up the plants, peas and all. I needed to get the plants out because the tomatoes are planted right in front of them, and they need the trellis that the peas were on. So it was really quick and easy, and I now have piles of plants with pea pods hanging off of them. And after I finish this podcast, I will be out there pulling the pods off of the plants. And then the plants I pulled today was only half of what's out there. So I'll spend the evening pulling the pods off of the plants, and the plants will go, the spent plants will go out onto the compost pile. So the beans are doing really well, and I would like to get a bit of time to go out there and fill in the blank spaces where a seed here and there didn't sprout. But even if I don't get to that accomplished, I'm going to have lots and lots and lots of beans and crowder peas. There are 2 full beds of peppers. One is a wonderful bell pepper called California Wonder. Those plants produce beautiful large green bell peppers like you find in the grocery. And if I leave them out there long enough, they will eventually turn red, and the red ones are really sweet. So I'll chop those up and put them in the freezer. We'll have those all the way through the winter. The other peppers are Italian pepperoncini. I'm going to pickle them. I'll probably sell the pickled pepperoncini at the farmer's market. I think there are a few banana peppers out there. I don't know what I'll do with them. Perhaps pickle them as well. We shall see. The onions look fabulous. I'm not sure how much longer they have before they're done. It's easy to tell with onions when they're done. The green tops just fall over and they dry out and turn brown. And that's the indicator for when it's time to dig them up and cure them for storage. And the tops just fall over. Now, as far as the fruit and the orchard trees, the strawberry plants look great. And there were lots of strawberries. However, something, probably the squirrels, was eating them, and we haven't gotten very many for ourselves. And that's yet another project that got on Scott's to-do list. Fix up some kind of barrier to keep out the squirrels, rabbits, birds, etc. that are eating the strawberries. He just doesn't have the time right now. So anyway, the plants look great. We'll get more berries at some later time. I checked the blueberries a few days ago, and there are a lot fewer berries than last year, a whole lot less. That is likely due to the beehive dying off. We really relied on those bees to pollinate everything. And this year, we were dependent on the bumblebees for all of our pollination. And there were a lot of them, but we still needed the honeybees, I think. Anyway, one thing I noticed while checking out the blueberries and blackberries is that we finally have a few apples coming on this year. I don't really know how old these trees are, but we have been anticipating apples and pears for a while. It takes quite a few years for the apples and pears to start producing. And it looks like this is going to be apples this year. A few, anyway. Now, what about that creamery? Well, the creamery is on hold yet again. Scott's off doing other things, mostly gathering hay. We tried to grow our own hay for a year or two and just found that it was simply not worth it for the small amount of hay that we need. You're maintaining the equipment. It really is always a challenge. And it's just better to let someone else have those headaches. And the person who normally supplies our hay is growing his own cow herd larger, so he needs more hay for that. And then the lack of rain at the appropriate time led to a smaller than usual harvest. So I got on Facebook and found a couple of places where Scott could get some hay. And unlike the previous arrangement, which was quite close and the hay was delivered right to us, in this arrangement, Scott is having to haul the hay here himself. These are large round bales, and he can handle 8 bales at a time on his trailer. It's a time-consuming task that requires days and days and days to complete 8 bales at a time. I think a half an hour each way to this one place. I'm not sure how far the other one is. In between, he's prepping the cows for the AI appointment and doing most of the milking tasks. He helps me on Mondays with making cheese and spends quite a bit of time cleaning up afterwards the large cheese vat and the large utensils. I handle the small stuff. And then on Friday and Saturday morning, he does the entire milking routine by himself as I'm at the farmer's market. And the creamery will get back on schedule soon, I'm sure. Speaking of making cheese, it's time for me to get to the topic of the day, cheddar cheese. We're going to talk about cheddar cheese. Let's start with the basics of describing this great cheese. It's a relatively hard cheese. Ours is off-white, and the stuff in the store is usually orange, although they do have a white cheddar in there. The cheddar cheese originated in the English village of Cheddar in Somerset, and now it's produced all over the world. So let me give you a little bit of background on that, a little bit more background. In the UK, cheddar is the most popular type of cheese, accounting for over half of the country's annual cheese market, and it is the second most popular cheese in the US. The most popular cheese in the U.S. is mozzarella. Now, in the U.S., the average annual consumption of cheddar cheese is about 10 pounds per person. And in 2014, the U.S. produced about 3 billion, that's with a B, 3 billion pounds of cheddar cheese. The term cheddar cheese is widely used and has no protected designation of origin. Even when the UK was part of the EU until 2020, there was no protected designation of origin. Many cheeses have a protected designation of origin name. So a PDO, the protected designation of origin, is the English name. It has different names in different languages in the EU, but it's the English name for an identification form that's used by the EU, and it's meant to preserve the designations of origin of food-related products. And the label was created in 1992, and its main purpose is to designate products that have been produced, processed, and developed in a specific geographical area, using the recognized know-how of the local producers and the ingredients from the region that's concerned. So the characteristics of products protected are essentially linked to the terroir. That's a French term used to describe the environmental factors that affect a food or a crop's unique environmental context. The farming practices, the growth habitat. Collectively, these contextual characteristics are said to have a character, and that terroir refers to that character. So the EU's regulation is meant to guarantee the reputation of regional products, adapt existing national protections to make them comply with the requirements of the World Trade Organization, and inform consumers that products bearing the PDO logo respect the conditions of production and origin specified by the designation. So this regulation covers all sorts of food stuff like wines, cheese, ham, sausage, olives, beers, fruit, vegetables, breads, animal feed. So some examples of food such as Gorgonzola, Parmigiano Reggiano, Asiago cheese, Camembert de Normandie, and Champagne can be labeled as such only if they come from the designated region. And there are other requirements. I know in the case of Camembert de Normandie, not only is it required to be produced in the Normandy region of France, it must also be made with raw milk from Normandy cattle. And there may be a few other requirements for it to be named that and have that PDO name. So cheddar doesn't have that kind. Cheddar's just used all over. The word cheddar is used all over, so there's no PDO for that. It does originate from the village of Cheddar in Somerset in southwest England. Cheddar Gorge on the edge of the village contains a number of cheese caves which provide the ideal humidity and steady temperature for aging and maturing the cheese. Now, cheddar has been produced since at least the 12th century. The financial records of King Henry II from 1170 records the purchase of 10,240 pounds of cheese. Charles I also bought cheese from the village of Cheddar, and I think he was 1600s. In the 19th century, Somerset dairyman Joseph Harding was central to the modernization and standardization of cheddar cheese. For his technical innovations, promotion of dairy hygiene, and volunteer dissemination of modern cheese-making techniques, he has been dubbed the father of cheddar cheese. Harding introduced new equipment to the process of cheese making, including a device for curd cutting called revolving breaker. It's called a revolving breaker. The Joseph Harding method was the first modern system of cheddar production based upon scientific principles. Together, Joseph Harding and his wife were behind the introduction of cheddar cheese into Scotland and North America, and his sons William and Henry were responsible for introducing the cheese production to Australia and facilitating the establishment of the cheese industry in New Zealand. And according to a USDA researcher, cheddar cheese is the world's most popular variety of cheese, and it is the most studied type of cheese in scientific publications. So what I want to talk about now is the cheddaring process, which gives it its name. That's an actual, besides being from the area of the village of Cheddar, the cheddaring process refers to an additional step in the production of the cheese. All cheese do culturing, cutting, and cooking, and draining, and then forming the cheese up. But with the cheddaring, with cheddar, you do the culture, the cutting, the cooking, and the draining, and then you've got this solid mass of curds, and the cheddaring begins. It's a lengthy process. You cut it up into slabs, and so you're stacking and turning these slabs of curd. And then it reaches a particular consistency, and then the large slabs are then milled back down into individual curds. They're broken up into small pieces again, and then they're salted before they get placed in the press, and all of those pieces are then pressed back together, and that press forms the final shape of the cheese. So all of that stacking and turning the slabs of cheese and then milling it that's all the cheddaring process. And then once it's been pressed, it's kept at a constant temperature and humidity level, and special facilities or a cheese cave, as mentioned before, are needed to complete this part, and it will mature anywhere from 3 months to 2 years or more for cheddar cheese. Now, the ideal quality of the original Somerset cheddar was described by Joseph Harding in 1864 as This is a quote from him. Close and firm in texture, yet mellow in character or quality. It is rich with a tendency to melt in the mouth. The flavor full and fine, approaching to that of a hazelnut. So that's how Joseph Harding described the original Somerset cheddar. Cheddar made in the classical way tends to have a sharp, pungent flavor, often slightly earthy. The texture is firm and it can be crumbly as it ages more. The cheddar cheese aged over 1 year should also contain large cheese crystals consisting of calcium lactate. Cheddar can be a deep to pale yellow color or the yellow-orange color when annatto is added. Annatto is extracted from seeds of a tree. Originally, it was added to simulate the color of high-quality milk from grass-fed Jersey or Guernsey cows, but it also imparts a sweet, nutty flavor to the cheese. Now, we don't use that. We don't use annatto in our cheddar cheese. We produce a beautiful, light, cream-colored cheddar cheese. Bright, citric flavors at the 6-month mark complement a smooth, creamy texture. As each cheese approaches its first birthday, the pineapple notes give way to a deeper, more savory cheese with a buttery, malty finish, offering a delightful taste sensation. So at 6 months, it is smooth and almost creamy. Aged a year or longer, it becomes deliciously crunchy, crumbly, and tangy. Pair it with a fruity Pinot Noir, a strong ale, apple liqueur or cider, or a vintage port. Our cheddar, I made your mouth water, didn't I? And our cheddar is currently only available via our herd share program. If you're listening to this in 2022 or later, this statement will be out of date. We plan to be in our inspected facility in early 2022, and we can make our cheddar available to the public at that time outside of the herd share. Well, that's it for today's podcast on cheddar cheese. The homestead's moving along nicely. We are moving into the summer routine. The animals are doing their thing, eating grass out in the fields. The gardens are flourishing, and the work continues to keep us on our toes. It is a healthy activity as we reach into our twilight years, and we appreciate the opportunity to share our journey with all of you. I hope you enjoyed the cheddar cheese information, and we look forward to serving your cheese needs in the future. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hop over to Apple Podcasts or whatever podcasting service that you use. Subscribe, give me a 5-star rating and a review. And if you like this content and want to help out the show, the absolute best way you can do that is to share it with your friends and family who might be interested in this type of content. Share it on all your social media. Let them know about the Peaceful Heart FarmCast. Thank you so much for stopping by the homestead. And until next time, may God fill your life with grace and peace.